everyone. I'm Bri Lynch, Head of Market Insight at EquityZen, and really excited to be here to talk with you all about our IPO outlook for 2026. I'm joined by Phil Haslett, our Chief Strategy Officer. Thanks for being here, Phil.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to be breaking down the companies that we expect to IPO next year, the sectors that are dominating the market, and how you as investors should think about this for your portfolio. So let's dive in. Before we really look forward, though, let's take a moment to look back at what's happened this year. We've called 2025 the year of the IPO resurgence. This was the most active year for IPOs since 2021. Why did that happen?
Well, I think we saw some really big blockbuster IPOs in 2025 that a lot of people would quite frankly kind of been waiting for, right? We saw CoreWeave, we saw Figma, we saw Circle, we saw Klarna, and some of these companies have been private for, 10 or 15 years. And what really became clear when those companies came public and full financials were released was that you had companies with really sound fundamental business models, right? You had good gross margins, you had good growth rates, you even had profitability in some of them. And I think that was just kind of emblematic that even though we may have not have seen the growth while companies were private because they weren't out there, these companies were performing really well in the shadows. And we finally got to see them come into light. And they felt like the market environment finally was really in a space where they could take their companies public.
Absolutely. In EquityZen's portfolio alone, we've had 16 exits this year. So a big year for exits, really exciting. So we talked about what happened this year. Let's look ahead. Our team put together our annual IPO outlook. We look at the companies that we think are most likely to go public and talk about why they're important to the market. When we look at this year's cohort of 12 companies, this isn't a group of small, strappy companies. These are mature, fast-growing companies that in a lot of cases are leaders in their specific market. So we'll throw out some of the high-level stats. The average age for these companies is 12 years old. The average last round of funding is a Series F. So these are companies that have raised several rounds of capital. When you look at Databricks, they've raised 11 rounds of capital, all the way to a Series K. We're going through the whole alphabet here with this list. So these are, well-capitalized companies that have grown substantially. We have headcounts ranging from 300 to over 10,000. We have revenue ranging from the 300 millions to the 3 billion. So while they're all older companies, some of those size stats really do vary. But on a whole, I would say these are all companies that would have been public 20 years ago. We've got companies kind of across stages, those that have filed an S1, and then those are maybe earlier stage in their IPO process where there's some executive conversations happening, they're talking to bankers. We kind of cover the whole gamut. When you look at this cohort of companies as a whole, how would you sum them up?
Yeah. Well, I think there has been a backlog of companies looking to go public. And we saw the first door opening in 2025 with the aforementioned names. What I think we'll see in 2026, based on the list that you and the team have put together, is kind of more of the full culmination of a bit more of a backlog coming out. And these aren't companies that are just going public because they have to or they're running out of cash. As we've seen with companies like Figma and Klarna and Circle, these are really healthy, large businesses that I think are taking the opportunity to go public. And I kind of think of the government shutdown as that little kind of kink in the hose, when the kids are playing around with it, it got twisted up a little bit. Now we're just going to undo that for 2026. We usually see right after the holidays when a lot of companies go and back to work and work with their bankers and work with everybody back in the office to get their IPOs going. And so, as you mentioned, these are big businesses, right? We're going to see companies with billions of dollars of revenue come into market. And now that there's been a lot of stability in the public markets on what margins, what growth rates really succeed and do well, I think companies are getting more and more comfortable. The last thing I'll say too is that if you look at how a company like maybe Figma or CoreWeave has performed post-IPO, it really depends which window you're looking at if you wanted to deem it a success or not. But I think at EquityZen, what we think about a lot is how did the company price and how is it traded first, that first kind of initial pricing of the IPO. And generally, Circle, Klarna, CoreWeave, et cetera, have performed well. They've also taken a bit of a hit with the public market, maybe from their local maximum, but that kind of comes with the territory of being a public business.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as we say, the IPO is not the whole story. It's the first step for, the next chapter for a lot of these companies, especially for long-term investors. So when we look at this class of companies, there's a variety of industries that they fall across, but There are a few that are kind of the more popular or heavily weighted ones. We see a lot of crypto or blockchain related companies, equally followed by FinTech, data, and AI hardware. Can you talk about why those are some of the more popular industries that we see with companies ready to IPO?
Yeah, well, crypto is an easy one. There's two things. One is that you've got a much more friendly regulatory environment and administration supportive of the US being more of the epicenter for crypto and blockchain. And the second part was there was a really successful IPO in Circle. And Circle, I think, is still up about 200% from its IPO price. And so that's really what's feeding the exuberance around blockchain companies. If you pivot over to fintech, I think you've also seen that there have been successful outcomes within fintech, right? Fintech's been really quiet for a while, actually. There have been companies that have kind of been quietly growing, maybe figured out that they can earn some net interest income on deposits and are now coming to market and showing some success. Klarna is a good example that you can do that. And then finally, you talk about AI infrastructure. AI is a pretty buzzy topic. It continues to be. I think there's more and more discussion about which layer the AI stack will perform and succeed long term as businesses. And it seems to be a consensus building that the foundational models, so when you think about Anthropic or OpenAI or XAI, will succeed because of scale, right? Google, by extension, and with the product they have with Gemini. But if you go one layer even below, there's AI infrastructure that supports those foundational models. So you could think of companies that build large chips, whether that's NVIDIA or Cerebras, which is still private. And those companies are kind of the equivalent of selling shovels during the gold rush. And so we consider that those are companies to keep an eye out for that will probably have a kind of pristine market opportunity to come to market in 2026 as well. So we're pretty excited to watch those too.
Absolutely. So we've covered some of the key sectors, some of the hot names. Let's dive a little deeper into a little lightning round into some of the household names on our list. So I'll say a name, you give me your take on it. First one being Wealthfront.
Great. Wealthfront, robo-advisor, no direct comp in the public markets, which will be interesting, even though everybody knows what a robo-advisor does. It's pretty table stakes now for financial advisors and for people managing their own money. Excited to see what will happen. I think they almost got acquired by UBS a few years back, but it seems like a business that's growing pretty healthily. So we'll just have to see.
And that one could go public as soon as this week. So we might have our answers sooner
Okay.
than later. All right. Next one, Kraken.
Trying to feed off of the crypto and blockchain momentum. It has a great comp in Coinbase, but Kraken has ambitions to be bigger than just a crypto exchange and has defended that by acquiring other companies, whether it's related to futures trading. So I'm excited to see that one too. It's kind of been a very popular name in the pre-IPO markets for a long time. Might not get its full credit, but it's got some really great investors behind it in the last round.
Absolutely. And this is an example of a company they filed last month while simultaneously raising a new round of funding at a $20 billion valuation. So a prime example of companies that are preparing to go public, not because they can't access capital, but for broader liquidity and investor access reasons. Awesome. All right. Next one, Anthropic.
Ooh, so Anthropic's going to be the first big foundational model to go public, or might be. And I think there's going to be an incredible amount of investor exuberance for the name, just because it's the first time that a retail investor might be able to buy, $50 worth of stock in one of these pure play solutions. I'm not thoroughly convinced they're going to do it in 2026. I think there's a lot to figure out as far as valuation goes and market appetite, but keeping a close eye.
Just because you're talking to lawyers doesn't mean the IPO is around the corner. So friendly reminder for everyone there, but certainly one that will have a lot of eyes on it. And then last one, can't really finish a lightning round without talking about the $800 billion elephant in the room. What about SpaceX?
Well, I have heard of SpaceX before, so it's good that we're talking about it. It's a 20-plus-year-old private company. Anything with an Elon Musk attachment, I think, performs well in the public markets, given his history with Tesla. I think this one would be an absolute blockbuster. It could end up being the largest IPO ever, exceeding Alibaba, exceeding Meta, SoftBank, Uber. Very exciting to see. Valuation is quite eye-opening for a company that is obviously huge and has great ambitions, but still would probably be trading at some reported 30x multiple of revenue. So we will see.
We will see indeed. So, this is a nice segue, really. We're talking about these massive valuations. You've got SpaceX, obviously, the largest private company, Databricks, another centacorn. And a lot of these other companies, all of them are unicorns and many of them are multiples of that. It really double clicks into this trend we've been seeing for a very long time now that if you wait for the IPO, you may have missed out already on the steepest part of the growth curve for these companies. So, how should accredited investors be thinking about IPOs? Are these the same blockbuster moments that they used to be, or is it kind of old news now that the market's changed?
Well, I think what's really cool is that we've actually offered investments in 10 of the 12 companies on our 2026 IPO target list, right? So that's a way of saying that not only are we suggesting that there are ways to invest in these companies while they're private, we've actually the proof is in the pudding, right? We've had them available. Obviously, it takes on risk, right? You're investing in the company while it's private, but what we historically see is that if you can kind of narrow down companies that are growing, that have a path to IPO, typically those IPOs are priced in a way that you want investors to make money as well. And that usually means that if you can invest while the company is still private, you have a chance to stand to gain. Now, that's not a guarantee by any means. Please do your own homework. But I think it's, again, a reminder that before the bell is a potential strategy to deploy as an individual investor.
Absolutely. We've looked at this mature, growing pipeline of companies in 2026 that we expect to go public. You can check out our full 2026 IPO outlook on our blog.equityzen.com, where you can see all of the companies, the full data, the whole breakdown. One final question for you, Phil. If you had to take out your crystal ball and guess which company is going to be the first to market, Wealthfront's off the table, couldn't give you that easy a softball, who might it be?
I would probably go with Cerebras in the AI infrastructure space. And the reason I say that is because the company had actually planned to go public a little over a year ago and had gone through the whole process with the S1 filing, put themselves out there, made themselves vulnerable by sharing all their information. And the response at the time was a little bit more muted, particularly because they had some heavy concentration in revenue from one or two customers. The company has since diversified away from that. They've taken on new funding from some blue chip private to public investors, mainly Fidelity. And to me, that bodes well that if you have that story going into 2026 and you're an AI infrastructure solution and NVIDIA is still top of mind, that seems like kind of a perfect candidate to consider. So never say never. Could really see that one coming a little bit earlier, but hey, what do I know?
No, it's a great one to pick. It's actually the most popular on our list of companies based on EquityZen popularity score. So certainly one where we've seen a lot of strong interest within the private markets. Thanks for joining, Phil. Always a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bri.
For those interested in learning more about investing in pre-IPO companies, check out www.equityzen.com/investor.